Hello, I'm Jim Morrish. I'm one of the founding partners of a company called Transforma Insights, a firm of industry analysts. And I am coming to you now from the floor of CES 2025, and I'm sitting on the IoT M2M Council's booth. And I have the great pleasure of being joined by Matt Wyckhouse, who is the founder and CEO of Finite State.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to be here talking to you today.
That's great, thank you. Thanks for joining us. So we're going to talk a little about regulations, I think, and the impact of regulations. The regulatory impact for IoT security in particular, it's evolving very rapidly. And there are frameworks like there's the EU Cyber Resilience Act, there's the US Cyber Trust Mark. These are becoming standards and bleeding from one country to another and no longer really demarked by just being implemented. They have effects outside of the geographies where they're actually enforced. How do these shape the challenges that connected device challenges face, and how does Finite State help them to address any compliance requirements?
It's a good and very loaded question. There's a lot to it. I'll start with this. It's been really interesting to see the market evolve over the last couple years, because what's happened is regulators globally stepped in and started saying that they're going to mandate certain security requirements in devices. And for the longest time, I think everyone just accepted that many IoT devices are going to be insecure and you have to find other ways to manage that, or just accept the risk. And so now with regulations, every device manufacturer who's selling into either the EU or into certain sectors in the US or internationally in a lot of countries that have specific regulations now have to meet minimum security standards. And I'll start by saying I think that's a good thing for everyone in the world.
Absolutely.
Because we haven't had enough security in a lot of these devices for a long time. So what we see on a day-to-day basis is that the big driver right now does seem to be the CRA in the EU, because it is such a sweeping regulation that every single company, whether they're a one product startup company or the largest companies in the world like Google or Amazon, all have to adhere to this regulation. And it sets some pretty straightforward but fairly stringent security requirements that you have to meet. So now all of a sudden we're seeing that everyone has to generate software bills of materials. That's something that's been a push from the US government for many years at this point. And we're finally seeing it globally recognized and being mandated. We're seeing vulnerability reporting requirements that are finally being required. We're seeing response times that are finally being required. We're seeing end of life and contract requirements that you have to support your devices for at least 5 years. All of these things are really good. And so what we do at Finite State is we help a lot of these companies who might be exploring how to do this for the first time ever because these regulations are forcing them to. We help them manage that process, and we automate a lot of that work. So we automatically generate SBOMs for software. We help engineers find security issues early in the development process and fix them so that you don't have vulnerabilities when you release your products. We help them basically instrument their entire development process in a way that leads to a more secure product at the end. And then finally, we spend a lot of time helping companies even just understand what all of these requirements are and translate that into actions that their R&D teams can take to make sure that they're compliant when they release their products.
Okay, so you've got a fast evolving and complex regulatory environment there. And of course you've got increasingly complex IoT devices out there, and the supply chains behind those IoT devices. So ensuring compliance can be quite resource intensive, I'm sure. But you've mentioned some automated tools there. So how do these tools, how do they actually help streamline the processes that support this this kind of certification, and what makes this particularly effective for IoT device security?
Yeah, we can just start with a very small example. So let's just look at the SBOM requirement, for example, which is arguably the most pervasive globally right now in these regulations, and arguably where the market is the most behind. So if you wanted to generate an SBOM in a way that's going to be compliant with the CRA and enable you to be ready for Cyber Trust Mark, or maybe you're a medical device manufacturer that needs to submit to the FDA, you have to generate it in a format that's going to be machine readable. You have to in one of these standard formats. But you also have to go through the process of generating that, inventorying all the software that is in the code that your developers are writing, and not only that your engineering team is building, but all of your suppliers and their engineering teams, all of the software that's inside of their code, and all of their suppliers, and the never-ending kind of supply chain that exists. It's virtually impossible to do that accurately without automated tools. And then when you add into the fact that connected device manufacturers release updates frequently. So depending on the sector you're in, you may have devices that update every week. You may have devices that update once a quarter. But in any case, you don't want to go through and try to manually manage that process every single time you have an update. There's just not enough people to throw that problem. It requires automation. So that's where solutions like Finite State that allow for very easy generation of this data, allow you to look inside your software, understand the components that are there, correlate them to vulnerabilities, and then rather than spending your engineering team's resources doing that work, take those resources and apply them to understanding the vulnerabilities and fixing them. That's basically where these automated tools come in. So whether it's SBOM, whether it's vulnerability reporting, whether it's license compliance checking, all of that requires some level of automation to be able to be scalable. And that is the thing that allows for compliance and security globally, which is what we're all after.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's very compelling. But right now, I mean, up until now, we've really been talking about reactive security, and many IoT manufacturers, they struggle to balance the proactive security measures with reactive compliance mandates. So how do you position yourself to help organizations shift from that reactive compliance model to something that's more proactive?
Right. It's really the journey that every company has to go on. So companies that are just starting out, trying to understand the regulatory environment, are going to start in a reactive place. That's just, they're reacting to regulation. They're reacting to potential fines or market access issues. We try to very rapidly push them into that proactive state. And what that means is you take a problem that tends to be centralized in one person or one team, like the security team, and you diffuse it out into the organization so that more people are involved in making the right decisions earlier. So a lot of that in the application security, product security space, we call that shifting to the left, doing it earlier in the development process where your engineering team is likely to be able to see things right as they're writing that code and make better decisions about the components they're using, make better decisions about the way that they're shipping those products. And so we offer source code analysis capabilities. We offer very easy integrations into GitHub and GitLab and other CI/CD pipelines. We also offer binary scanning capabilities, which allows you to screen third-party code that's coming into your organization. So the more you embrace that automation and diffuse it out into your organization, the earlier you're going to find the problems, and the more you can just ingrain that into your internal processes. That's how you move to a proactive security posture.
That makes a lot of sense. But there's a lot of different security vendors out there. So if we just close on your thoughts on what you think it is that makes Finite State different, and how you see this space evolving.
Yeah, so there are a lot of vendors in, let's say, the application security space that do a lot of work on web applications and cloud applications. Finite State, in our 7 years that we've been around, we've been focused on embedded devices from the outset. So we've built our capabilities to be really specific to this exact problem, which is how do you make sure that the devices you're shipping are secure? In order to do that, it's arguably a harder problem than looking at virtual machines and cloud infrastructure and containers, because embedded devices are the Wild West in terms of what sort of frameworks and software languages that you use. So we have the broadest compatibility of anyone in the market. So we can look at C code that goes into a small microcontroller, or we can look at something written in Python that's running in a container that's doing some AI work inside of some edge device. So we have really broad capabilities. We also can look at software at any point in the development process, getting on what I touched on earlier. The further you do that to the left, the better off you're going to be in the long run. But you also need to cover your blind spots with the binary analysis capabilities. So we have a really, really strong breadth of capabilities. The other thing we do is we go deeper than most other companies. So when we look at a binary, we don't just compute the hash and figure out what it is. We actually disassemble it and decompile it and look at the control flow graphs and go very, very deep into it to make sure that we're not missing anything. And that's, again, really important when you have to look at the regulatory environment and you have to assert to both your customers and to regulators that your products are secure and you've done your diligence. And so we think that we offer a really great solution that allows companies to very easily ship secure products to market, even in this very complicated regulatory environment.
That sounds very compelling. So Matt, it's been extremely interesting to have this discussion with you, and some very interesting topics I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about in the coming year. But thank you very much for joining me.
Likewise, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.